Mallory, let's get into our games of the week for this week.
Okay, Craven, you're going to be at this game. Super jealous here. Number 8 LSU traveling to play number 14 Texas A&M this Saturday, October 22nd, 6:30 p.m. You can watch it on ABC. Texas A&M coming in as 2.5-point favorites. Over unders 53.5. Craven
For sole first place in the SEC.
for sole first place in the SEC. Craven, I'm interested to hear what you're going to be looking for at this game.
Well, the home team usually wins this game. I think it's 7 or 8 years in a row they've played. The home team has won it, so that's good news for A&M. This feels like a Nick Skirton, Shamar Stewart versus Campbell and Jones, the two really good offensive tackles for LSU. If A&M's defensive line can win the battle against LSU's offensive line, I think the Aggies have a good chance. Conversely, if LSU's offensive line can keep those guys in check and win in the front seven and run the football, I think LSU is going to have a good day. Quietly, Texas A&M's offensive line has become pretty good. They're top 15 rushing team in the country. They're second in the SEC in sacks and tackles for loss allowed. So, one of the big question marks going into the season was what that Aggie offensive line is going to be. They've turned the corner. I think this is a Connor Wigman, type situation here. Like, he looked really good against Missouri, but I kind of feel like Drinkwitz in that group didn't think he was going to play, didn't prepare for Connor Wigman. Mississippi State had a whole week to prepare. You saw what he looked like, not as good as he did the week before. So maybe some home cooking helps out Wigman, but he's going to need to make some throws against a LSU defense that's been better without Harold Perkins than they were with him.
Yeah, Weeks. His 39 tackles in the last 3 games, 5.5 tackles for loss. I saw a video on social media of him with the cornrows. So he's gone full LSU. But Craven, you mentioned the LSU offensive line versus Texas A&M defensive line. Mike Elko had said, there's $10 million on the line here this weekend, boys. And so Nick Skorton, Shamar Turner. By the way, shameless plug, I got a Nick Skorton story out right now on TexasFootball.com about his upbringing from Bryan High School to Kyle Field on Saturday. But that LSU offensive line is 3rd in the nation in tackles for loss allowed. So that's the key matchup here. I'm thinking, to me, this game feels similar to Texas versus Georgia in the sense that Texas had all the momentum, but they'd really only played 2 good helmet games versus Michigan and Oklahoma. Texas A&M has all this momentum here. They've really only played Notre Dame and Missouri, who are both maybe paper tigers. And have we forgotten how good LSU is?
I think for me, LSU, this is one of the worst weeks to play LSU because I think that Garrett Nussmeier had one of his best games against Arkansas. He didn't put up a lot of yards. I don't think he had a touchdown in that game, but he's been a quarterback who's been up and down, right? Obviously, after Ole Miss, I believe he's through like sub 50% or something like that.
Yeah.
But last week he really solidified himself as a very capable player, and I think also Caden Durham has established himself as RB1 for this team. So I think that LSU is figuring things out as opposed to maybe especially after the USC game, but even after, I'm looking at the South Carolina game, the UCLA game, where it was like, what really is this team on offense? I think they're finding it. Again, this A&M defense is still, I think, their toughest challenge probably by far so far this season. Yeah. But I think this isn't the same LSU to where you were like, what's Brian Kelly doing? What's this offense about? I think they're now starting to round into shape because this is an LSU team that had a lot of playmakers that are changing. Obviously, the Heisman Trophy winner, right? But I mentioned Caden Durham. Like, I think they're now starting to find those kind of guys just in time for A&M.
Texas high school football stars, Caden Durham from 100%. Duncanville, Garrett Nussmeier there. Garrett Nussmeier leads the conference with 18 touchdown passes, but he can give a few away.
I was about to say, he also has 6. He's had 4 interceptions since that South Alabama game, which, again, he didn't look that great in either. He threw 2 of those in that game, but he's had 4 interceptions since that game. So, again, he's turned the ball over. Last week he had a very clean game against an Arkansas team where LSU kind of handled them. That was one of the first games that they've handled wire to wire this year against a Power 5.
Craven, do you agree that you don't want to play LSU right now and maybe we forgot how good LSU is?
Yeah, they're definitely playing better and better. They escaped from that Ole Miss win at home. They go and dominate an Arkansas team that gave A&M some trouble. This feels like a turnover game, not to get too reductive, but, whichever defensive coordinator can confuse the other quarterback, steal a possession or two, I think it's going to be a tight game. These usually are between these two teams that come down to the end, and, a couple mistakes may be the difference in this one.
And also, you want to talk about quarterbacks who can give one away. Connor Wigman was
He
not
tried
exactly,
to give like 4 away.
I was about to say he was
Mississippi
not
State.
exactly great. Coming off his best game of his career against Missouri, he was not good against Mississippi State. So again, this is gonna like Craven mentioned, this is gonna be a battle of which offense can just hold on to the ball going forward. Which again, I would, based on the entire season, I would probably pencil A&M to be that team. But if this is LSU turning a corner, it's a different story.
Yeah. Do you think Mike Elko was the former defensive coordinator under Brian Kelly? Remember that one, the old Brian Kelly stories about how he made like Robert Saleh and Matt LaFleur valet cars as graduate assistants?
Yes.
I wonder if Mike Elko has any like crazy Brian Kelly stories about that he's going to take out on him as defensive coordinator.
I feel like everybody has a Brian Kelly story. What's next, Mallory?
Okay. Number 22, SMU traveling to play Duke this Saturday at 7 p.m. You can watch it on ACC Network. SMU, 11.5-point favorites. The over-under, 48.5.
All right, so we got some news this morning. Unfortunately for our boys at LSU, number one target, RJ Maryland, will miss the rest of the year, according to head coach Red Lashley. So how does that I think – I don't know if that dictates my opinion that much about this game. Duke is good. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say. Their offense is pretty atrocious right now, though. The Malik Murphy experiment has not been working out.
Well, don't say that just yet. Come on, 6-1.
They're 6-1.
They're 6-1. Look,
They might be the softest 6-1 in the country.
The softest 6-1, and they are definitely because of that defense right now.
Yeah, the defense is giving up 17 points per game. It's the number one defense in the ACC. I know we don't like to play the schedule game, but we have to with Duke and 6-1. Their wins are Elon, Northwestern in double overtime, UConn, Middle Tennessee, a 1-point win over North Carolina, who got boat raced by James Madison, and Florida State, who is an absolute shell of itself.
So I'll say this. I was talking to Clayton Craven. I want your opinion on this, too. I was talking to Clayton Hackler, who, of course, in our office, an SMU grad. I was like, hey, man, how you feeling about SMU, just in general, right, just this season? And he was like, oh, it's great. We don't get Miami. We don't get Clemson. But it's a payback for the conference that every other team we do play is having like the best start to the season in like 20 years. Because you got Virginia, you had Duke, and all these teams that are like starting out really, really well. I do think, though, that I don't want to say fraud. I'm not saying that. I'm saying a little bit of paper tiger to this Duke team, particularly, like you mentioned, particularly on offense. This defense has been so good. Of course, Manny Diaz, Jonathan Packey, that's their MO. I just wonder, and maybe this is where the RJ Maryland absence comes into play. What happens when you play an offense that can maybe get one or two plays beyond?
Yeah.
Now, Craven, this is where I'm gonna, offer to you. How much is that hindered by RJ Maryland now being out?
Yeah, I mean, he has been their number one target. He has 24 receptions on the year. Nobody else has more than 20, right? So, like, he is their number one receiving threat. They're going to need Jake Bailey, Keyshawn Smith, Moochie Dixon. I think Brashard Smith out of the backfield.
Yep.
Maybe he plays a little bit more wide receiver in the slot to kind of give them an over-the-middle presence because, Kevin Jennings, I think young quarterbacks who don't have the strongest arm in the world, like, it is easier to throw inside the hash marks than outside of it, right? So I think RJ Maryland becomes a big threat. He's a big target. You don't have to be perfect with the ball for him to catch it. So, that is something to watch for Kevin Jennings. They're averaging over 40 points a game since he's been inserted as the starter. So they're scoring points. And I think that's why this is a good matchup for SMU. Duke's defense is good, but they're not Ohio State or Texas or Alabama. Like, they're going to – I guess I got to stop using Alabama as that example.
I know, right?
But, that offense only averages 25.9 points a game. The worst offenses in the ACC are Stanford, Cal, Florida State. You saw what SMU did with those teams. I think the only way you can beat SMU is if you can get into the 30s with them. And this Duke team against this SMU defense, not going to be able to do it. SMU's defense has allowed too many big plays. I think if you talk to Scott Simons, that's a gripe of his. But conversely, they've created a lot of big plays. They are one of the best teams in the country at curating turnovers. They've scored a lot of non-offensive touchdowns. If they're able to keep that up, I just don't think Duke can score enough points to make this one a good game.
I don't think what Duke does on defense well plays into defeating SMU because they like to blitz the quarterback. And I think Kevin Jennings is too mobile and too calm and assured in the pocket to really get flustered by that. And Duke's defense is number one in the conference in passing defense, but 13th in the conference, I believe, in rushing defense. So if they just lean on Kevin Jennings and Brashard Smith, kind of milk the clock in this game, Duke won't even have a chance to get into a boat race with them.
No, I agree. I think that you look at some of these wins over North Carolina, who's really struggling this year, right? 1-point win for Duke. Their loss was to Georgia Tech, who, again, they've been up and down, but I believe Haynes King was healthy for that game, so that was a fully healthy Georgia Tech. And then you kind of look at Florida State, and they barely beat them by a touchdown. We've seen what they are this year. Malik Murphy in those games, even in those wins, 200 yards, barely over 200 yards, and then 70 yards against Florida State. So it was
it's 70 total yards?
Passing at least, right?
Okay.
And so, again, it goes back to like,
Eek.
yeah, right. It is like a lot of like relying on that defense to generate turnovers. That's kind of course, Texas fans know this. That's what Manny Diaz wants to do. It's very exotic. It's very, flashy. If you have somebody like Kevin Jennings, I think this will be a very telling game for him. Because you mentioned it, right? They love to put pressure on the quarterback. And if he is matured and continuously proving to be the guy, this type of defense will be his biggest challenge, probably mentally in the game, right? Can you make certain calls at the line? They're going to maybe disguise some blitzes. They're going to probably have some drop back into coverage, but show blitz, things like that. This is going to be a very interesting game for him, in my opinion.
This is the type of game that'll prove why you had to go to Kevin Jennings over Preston Stone.
Yeah. That's
in
fair.
my opinion.
I can agree with that. Craven, would you agree with that? Last thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's already been pretty well proven. I mean, SMU's completely turned a corner since Jennings come in there. We'll see how they deal with the RJ Merrill. I'm interested from a schematic standpoint, just kind of what they do on third downs and when they need big plays, because that has been RJ Maryland's theme music. When they've needed a big third down, when they've needed a big play, think back to Nevada.
True.
He's been the guy. They're going to have to find a new guy to do that.
Keyshawn Smith and Moochie Dixon did have a 45-yard touchdown and 87-yard touchdown in Stanford, but that is also Stanford.
Still, we'll see. Last notes on this game. Under pressure, found this stat real quick. Under pressure, Kevin Jennings, almost 80% completion, 6 touchdowns, no interceptions. So it
makes it easier for him.
Yeah, exactly. So it's very
he gets one-on-one coverage. You know what the reads are. You're in man. I think if you can't get to him, it makes it easier for him to blitz him.
Yeah. So anyway, Mallory, what's next?
I'll be at this next game. Tulane.
So will I.
Are you really?
Yeah, I'm going to it.
Oh, funny. Well, it's our homecoming game, so.
Carter's working.
Yeah. I'll be there in support of North Texas. North Texas hosting Tulane this Saturday at 11 a.m. You can watch it on ESPN2. Tulane, 8-point favorites, over under 66.5. Carter, take it away. You'll be working. I'm not.
Yeah, North Texas plays football like I play Xbox. Just
that is
so many points and just turnstiles on defense.
Yeah.
And I just think it's going to limit them it's going to make this game really fun and really interesting, but I just don't know if they can beat Tulane because Tulane is a ball control offense. They're going to lean on running back Mekhi Hughes. Mm-hmm. If the North Texas defense could just stop giving up road to glory numbers on opposing running backs, I'd feel so much better about it.
I will say this before we pitch it off to Craven. I tweeted this out and I feel more confident. I tweeted this out after the FAU game, and I feel more confident after heading into this game. North Texas wins the AAC with an average defense. They win the AAC. I don't think it's close. This offense is better than last year after being really good last year, and they're not running the ball well this year. Right? Like, they lost their entire backfield. I was like, I don't know. That was a big thing that they had going into last year. And it doesn't matter. Chandler Morse has been awesome.
He's got 600 more yards and 11 more touchdown passes than the next best in the conference in both categories.
And again, this is like a remade wide receiving core as well. Like, it's been that much better. And their defense has probably gotten a fraction better because they were like abysmal last year. But like, I still think if they get to average, they would run away with this conference. Because as we saw last week, Memphis was up by 2 scores with like under 4 minutes or something like that, and UNT still almost won the game, right? So
it's unbelievable.
I do worry about this though, is because like what happens when that offense is not go, everything's successful, What happens when they do get stopped once or twice? I'm worried about if Tulane is that team, and more in particular, like you mentioned with the defense, the run game just cannot get a single stop. In the air, they've generated turnovers. They've gotten interceptions, obviously. But it's on the ground that they've just continued to be just completely decimated.
They thought they were going to have some safety help that was going to help in the run game. Asheen Young, being probably first on that list, not having him's been pretty tough. And that makes this a tough matchup for North Texas. Like, I think that they're a good pass defense is wrong, but I think they're okay as a secondary, as a pass defense, but they just cannot stop the run. And then now that allows the passing game to get going because you have to put more in the box. And Tulane can really run the football. They are run heavy, ball control. Summerall, kind of defensive guy, loves the physicality there. North Texas and Eric Morris's tenure just has not proven capable of dealing with physical offenses. They need a quick start because they just kind of seem to get behind in these games against American Athletic Conference kind of contenders, and then they got to come from behind. The offense does play well, but this happened all last year. It happened again last week against Memphis. So, a better start defensively, maybe steal a possession or two. That's your chance here. Home crowd gets into it, but yeah, a tough matchup for North Texas this week.
Home crowd gets into it. Mallory, that's on you.
Don't worry, I'll carry the fan base this weekend.
There's your work. I was about to say, there's your work.
My work
Yeah.
there is
You
to get
are
people
on
at
assignment.
the game. Yeah, correct. No kidding.
It was kind of tongue in cheek.
Correct.
Eric Morris is yelling at fans today at the press conference.
I was about to say,
kind of get over yourself for the 11 o'clock kickoff. I love it. Somebody's got to call those guys out.
What do you
love
What do you
11
say to that, Mallory? What's your official response?
I like 11 a.m. kicks because then you have the rest of the afternoon to do whatever you need to do.
Mm-hmm.
I like 11 a.m. I've always liked 11 a.m. kicks. I mean, we only had one in college, but this is guess my second 11 a.m. kick. But I liked the one that we had.
If I see you leaving in the third quarter, I'm going to say something on the Sunday recap show.
I'm not gonna leave. It's homecoming.
Get a photo of where her section is.
Yeah.
And then get
I'm
a
not
photo
telling you
with
where I
5
am.
minutes to go in the fourth quarter and make sure she's still there.
I'm not telling you guys where I am.
He'll be able to find you,
I was about
Mallory.
to
It won't be that hard.
I'll be the only one.
Ba-dum.
Okay.
What's next,
Anyways,
Mallory?
number 5, Texas traveling to play SEC powerhouse number 25 Vanderbilt this
America's
Saturday
team.
at 3:15. Literally America's team. You can watch
Can I
it
say
on
something real
SEC
quick? Go
Network.
Go for it.
When I was at the Sun Bowl last year watching New Mexico State pummel the Miners with Diego Pavia,
Yeah.
I just could not have dreamed a scenario where he was going to play against the Texas Longhorns as an SEC quarterback. It is just so awesome to see it translate from Conference USA to the SEC. They beat Alabama. Jared Kill is one of the better coaches in the country. It's been cool to see the kid who was terrorizing teams in Conference USA prove that he could do it at a bigger level.
Yeah, Texas is rolling with the narrative you'd rather get knocked out in the 6th round than the 12th round. Well, what happens in the 7th round when Diego Pavia's come in?
Look, I love the fact that the nation, because Craven, you mentioned it, when he got in the portal last year, I was praying that somebody from Texas would
Oh my God. I was on my hands and knees.
I was like, throw the bag. I don't care how much he's asking for, right? Obviously, he ended up following his head coach, Jerry Kill, who's an analyst or assistant, I believe, at Vanderbilt now. But it would have been awesome because he was one of the most underrated, untalked about stories last year of just how exciting he is. And I love that, again, Craven, I know you're not a stats guy, but I love that Bill Connolly, the super nerd he is at ESPN, literally came up with a metric for a dog. And Diego Pop, it's a combination of completion percentage, under pressure, times out of the pocket. It's a lot of metric things for obviously that would make somebody just fun to watch.
Swagger.
Yeah, sure. Metric for swagger, I don't know. But Diego Pop is leading the country in it. It's amount of times he leaves the pocket, amount of rushing yards, completion percentage outside the pocket, amount of, you look at the numbers and it's how is he doing this when knowing that, if they rush 5, he's going to drop back. He's like Tecmo Bowl, right? He's going to drop back 20 yards, run around. He's like, I'm going to either get a gain of 4 or I'm going to hit somebody for a gain of 40. And it's what are you going to do? You can't game plan for that because you game plan around having a spy on him. But what happens when he just jukes the spy out and it's okay. Or that spy's now out of coverage. By the way, here's a little slant for the tight end. No big deal. He's so much fun to watch.
They told you the quarterback duel was Carson Beck versus Quinn Ewers, but it might be Quinn Ewers versus Diego Pavia.
I was going to say it might be Quinn Ewers versus Arch Manning. But anyway.
Well, about that, how big of a deal is it that Quinn Ewers didn't go to the Monday press conference? Look, okay, Quinn Ewers is not opting out like a website's Instagram got hacked and they said they were. By the way,
I mean, we can say they apologized. 247 apologized for it, so we can say it. That's fine.
Did you see Quinn Ewers on his Instagram story did the Trump fake news thing?
Oh yeah, no. So here's what I take.
He still got it.
Here's what I take before I do want Craven's insight on this as well. Here's what I take from that Monday press conference. Everybody knows what the questions would have been about, and so I don't. For somebody who should he have gone out there? Yeah, probably. But for somebody who's done media every single week, right? No matter what. I can see them after that week start going, hey, probably not this week. Just because we know it's going to be do you think Sark still has faith in you? Do you do what were you thinking of?
God, I would hate that.
Right, and so
that would suck
again, now the head coach kind of put him in that situation because of how he talked leading into that game and then the decision he made, right or wrong, whatever you believe. But I can understand Texas looking at that and saying, all right, maybe not this week. Craven, what are your thoughts on the game, obviously, and then also the Quinn Ewers stuff yesterday about the press conference?
I think it would have been a bigger deal if he didn't talk to the media Saturday. I mean, he sat for 15, 20 minutes on Saturday and took every single question. And had he kind of shucked away from that, maybe that would have been a bigger concern. But I think you're right. He had answered every single question Saturday night. He was going to get the exact same questions Monday. More of a distraction than you probably needed as Longhorns coming off of a loss. And so you just kind of skip it, you deal with it, and you move forward.
Yeah.
I think the concern for Texas is the slow starts. They had a slow offensive start against Mississippi State with Arch Manning in there, slow offensive start against Oklahoma, slow offensive start against Georgia. Now, Georgia's the only team that can take advantage of that slow start, but that is what Vanderbilt does, right? Like, they just suck you into quicksand. It's the third or fourth quarter. You look up at 17-13. You've only had like 6 offensive possessions. You're like, how the hell did we start this? Like, how did we get into their style of fight? So if you're Texas, you got to make it look more like your team. Like, let your athletes get in space. Like, let the big guys on the defensive line really dominate up there. On paper, this feels like one Texas should handle because they are physical enough to deal with Vanderbilt. But if you go watch that Vanderbilt-Alabama game, it wasn't a fluke. Like, that wasn't Alabama turning the ball 4 or 5 times and all of a sudden Vanderbilt pulled the upset. Like, they just strictly beat them up in front in the edges, in the trenches. So if you're Texas, you bring your chin strap, bring your mouthpiece. It's going to be a physical game, and you have to take advantage of your offensive possessions because you're not going to get very many.
Yeah, for all the talk about Diego Pavia, rightfully so, right? He is the guy on this offense. Clark Lee is a defensive coach, right? And you mentioned it, Craven. Like, a lot of the stuff they did against Alabama was just straight up. It wasn't gimmick offense. It wasn't, Diego Pavia doing superhuman things. He had a great game, but like a lot of that was making Jalen Milroe throw a little more than he wants to, right? This is actually a really good rushing defense, and again, Texas kind of been struggling trying to figure out exactly who the guy is in that rushing offense this year. If they force Quinn Ewers into passing, right? I'm not saying he can't get it done against Vanderbilt. Obviously, he should be able to. Jalen Milroe, obviously not as capable of a passer as Quinn Ewers, or Arch Manning, whatever they decide, whatever. I know Quinn Ewers is going to start, but you know what I'm saying. You know what I mean. Vanderbilt, if they are able to take one aspect of the game away, any top defensive coordinator in the country can then go, okay, we can work with that. And then you're betting on your guy, Diego Pavia, doing something to be able to offset that on the other end.
I think the blueprint on Quinn Ewers as a defense, and this is kind of the same with a lot of quarterbacks, so this isn't like earth-shattering news, is to disguise the blitz packages and then take away the first and second read and just hope he doesn't get to the third read.
Sure.
I think Clark Lee and the defense can schematically draw some things up to confuse him, but I don't think Vanderbilt has the athletes in the secondary to make it to where Quinn Ewers' first and second read isn't open like Georgia was doing.
I was about to say, there's a difference between, exactly how Oklahoma and Georgia started those games, right? Oklahoma started it well defensively, but Georgia was able to sustain that throughout most of the game. So
now the lines of scrimmage, though, I totally agree with what you and what Craven are saying about Alabama Vanderbilt game. Vanderbilt was physically matching up with Alabama on the lines of scrimmage. I think that's why the transfer portal is so awesome, is because it really gives a little more parity in these bottom halves of the Big Ten, the SEC. Like, they can, a couple of years ago, Vanderbilt's not on the same field as Alabama there.
Yeah.
So this is not your older brother's Vanderbilt team.
And lastly, Craven, we saw a little bit of criticism, rightfully so, to my opinion, for the Texas offensive line against Georgia. Obviously, Walker, not everybody has a Walker or really any pass rushers like Georgia, but it's not the first time this season we've had issues with the Texas offensive line. How much of a concern is that continuing to be? Obviously, you put an asterisk next to Georgia, but this isn't the first time we looked at the offensive line and we're like, it's not quite what we thought.
Yeah, I mean, that unit needs to be better because, as Carter mentioned, Quinn Ewers isn't a fast processor. I don't think that's a skill set of his. It's not one of his strengths. And if the first or second guy is open, he's got an incredible arm. That's why he's a 5-star with like a scholarship offer when he's in 8th grade, right? But like, I do think there is some stuff you can do to disguise and confuse not only Quinn Ewers, but that offensive line. Like, I don't think Georgia just straight up beat up front in a lot of ways. They confused Texas up front in a lot of ways, and that allowed the pressure to get there. Quinn's got to do a better job of not getting into pressure himself. I think he kind of scrambled into pressure, didn't step up when he could have to kind of get away from some of that. So the quarterback can help out the offensive line. But, Cam Williams at the right tackle position is still a very raw, very young, uberly talented prospect, but he's still seeing stuff for the first time. He didn't adjust well to Georgia. I almost think the performance against Georgia helps Texas not sleepwalk into this one. Had they beat Georgia, they're 7-0 going into a trip at Vanderbilt. I think trap game, maybe that can be a concern. But, coming off of a loss, if this Texas team can't respond after that Georgia loss, then the expectations we all have for them are probably not reachable.
Yeah, and I saw a lot of criticism for Kellen Banks on Twitter. Listen, guys, that was an NFL matchup. Like, literally, those guys are going to be going at Jalen Walker and Kelvin Banks are going to be matching up in the NFL for the next 10 years. So, like, yes, he's going to get beat on some reps. It's fine. Like,
was that like the third sack he allowed in his career?
I was about to say, no, it was like, there was one clip going around. I was like, okay, yeah, he's going to go in the first round. They're both going to go in the first round. It's fine. Like, you're not going to beat every rep, even if you're a number 1 overall pick left tackle, if a guy's capable of edge rushing against, it's fine. But yeah, the rest of the offensive line, different story. Kelvin Banks is perfectly fine. Mallory, last game.
Y'all want a Texas tie to Vanderbilt?
Yes.
Cedric Alexander,
there we
the running back.
Yeah.
Austin LBJ, he was a part of the 2021 state title appearance back.
Yeah,
so many Texas ties on this slate.
A lot of Texas ties.
I love it.
It's kind of fun. Okay, last game of the week. Let me find it. Texas Tech playing at TCU this Saturday at 2:30 p.m. You can watch it on Fox. TCU 7-point favorites. The over/under 66.5.
Talk about a game that I thought I knew about a week ago.
I know.
And then now I'm like, do I know?
Well, did TCU figure it out, or did they play Zach Wilson's brother, and
here's
offensive coordinator that just left?
I was about to say, here's the thing. Like, yes, they beat Utah. Big asterisk. I think I always like to imagine that the Utah OC walked in the meeting and they're like, all right, so we're figuring out the NIL situation next year for Cam Rising. He's like, I'm done. He's like, I'm done. I can't. No more.
Yeah.
No more. We have so much money and we're giving it to this guy again. Anyway, Craven, what do you take from last week more? Do you take Tech's loss to Baylor in the situation that they did, or do you take TCU's win against a Utah team that obviously has a lot of holes and issues in and of itself?
No cameras.
Probably more of the Tech loss, just how bad that defense is, and it's not creating pressure, it's not creating havoc in the backfield, and that's typically the calling card of the Tim DeRuyter defense. Like, they give up some big plays, they give up some passing yards, but they get enough sacks, they get enough tackles for loss. That creates a couple turnovers that you end up being okay with some of the bend but don't break defensive stuff. They're just breaking, or at least they just broke against Baylor. Every time the offense felt like it got them back in the game, the defense allowed a big drive to kind of create that space again. TCU, though, I think that they needed that win more than any other team in the state, right? Like, it was starting to get kind of bleak and kind of dark. You look at the message boards and Twitter and just, the vibes around the program. They needed to get back on track, so that's a big win. This happened in 2022. Like, Baylor came into Tech and beat the brakes off of Texas Tech. And the next week was a trip to Fort Worth for the Red Raiders. And they lost that game as well before going on a 3-game winning streak to close the season. So if you're Sonny Dykes, you can look at a wounded, kind of maybe a confident, leaking Texas Tech team and say, hey, we can get this one. We can get to 5-3. And all of a sudden we can right the ship. And conversely, if you're Tech, you can throw out last week. If you can go on the road where you struggled so far in Joey McGuire's tenure, go on the road, get a win against an okay, solid football team, and then maybe you can put last week behind you. But this is one that's definitely going to make or break kind of the opinions on the outside on both of these teams. Like, whoever loses this team or loses this game, the fan base is going to be very upset. It's going to be hard to kind of build momentum back for the rest of this year.
This might be the biggest implications game of the week.
Sure. Yeah.
And I saw Steven Johnson on Twitter, who covers TCU, said Scud James in the press conference, he saw a different side of Sonny Dykes this morning in practice. They know how much this means to Sonny Dykes. Obviously, was a Texas Tech coach before that.
Yeah.
I think you got to smash the over in this game because both of these defensive weaknesses are what the offense does really well.
Sure.
Like, Texas Tech is the 16th ranked passing defense, and Josh Hoover likes to air that thing out.
Yeah.
And then TCU is the 13th ranked rushing defense. Tosh Brooks is a bowling ball. So I think it just the matchups are really bad for both defenses. The bend, I like that, Craven. The bend but break defense at Texas Tech.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, Josh Hoover likes to air it out mainly because he has to, because they also can't run the ball on offense. TCU.
Yeah, and Sonny Dykes also said they ran Savion Williams.
They did
as a Wildcat quarterback. They probably can't do that the rest of the season.
Yeah,
like they need to find a running back.
They did. I believe he had 7 rushers. He was their leading rusher last week, just because they don't have any running backs basically that are capable of shouldering the load. So yeah, I am very fascinated because heading into last week, we were talking about Tech as turning the corner, right? Like, oh, Baron Morton's playing well. He's able to supplement these skill position guys that we know had a lot of talent. The offensive line's holding up, and the defense is playing well enough to not mess things up. Well, guess what? They messed things up, right? Sawyer Robertson looked incredible. I think that the Jake Spavital offense is fully fit for him. Like he's able to hit these little flat screens to Josh Cameron. Bryson Washington broke out last week as well. He's probably establishing himself as RB1.
Well, that's the thing. Baylor couldn't run the ball until they played Texas Tech. So TCU couldn't run the ball until they played Texas Tech.
That is a great point. Maybe they should line Savion and we'll just nothing but Wildcat. Just have over 100 yards.
Yeah, I don't know. Here's your favorite question. Must win, can't lose. Which team has which?
Oh, God. Jesus, we're doing this. Must win, can't. I mean, it's Tech. It's a must win for Tech.
I think Tech must win. TCU can't lose.
I think
at home.
I think similarly to Dave Aranda last week. I don't know if a win over Tech changes things as opposed to like makes things palatable, right? I don't think opinions on Aranda change. I think it made it more palatable, and you're less salty going into the rest of the year. I think similarly for Sonny, I think if you're Tech, if you lose back-to-back games like this against your in-state foes, that's a different situation to me. Because then you were riding high, and now all of a sudden expectations are back down to pessimistic. So I'm going to say this is a bigger game for Tech, but obviously if TCU goes and drops this game, it's not good.
Yeah, Craven, what do you think?
Yeah, TCU's 1-2 at home, with that only win being over Long Island, and I do think the way you play in front of your home fans does a lot, 5-7 last year, kind of fluttering around 500 this year. A win against Texas Tech, like you mentioned, a school that he has some ties to. His dad was the coach there. Sonny and Joey got these jobs the exact same year, basically. And so, they are measured next to each other. We talk about it all the time. Like college football is as fun as it is miserable for your rivals. And you measure yourself against Baylor, Texas Tech. If you're TCU, after that 2022 run, you kind of thought you were going to be the class of the new Big 12, that you've turned a corner, that you were going to have 8, 9, 10 win seasons and be in contention all the time. It hasn't happened yet. I think for Joey, he's trying to turn the corner, and then it feels like a 2-step forward, 1-step back thing at Texas Tech right now. So I do think this is a very consequential game for both programs, both head coaches, both fan bases, even if not for this year, just how you feel going into the offseason, going into next year.
Yep. All right, Mallory, let's NASCAR it and get out of here.
Just NASCAR it. First up in the lightning round, Sam Houston playing at FIU tonight at 6:30 p.m. You can watch it on ESPNU. Sam Houston coming in as 4.5-point favorites. The over/under 46.5. Craven, what's your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, Hunter Watson's availability is still up in the air. Got banged up last week against Western Kentucky. If he can play, Sam Houston rolls. If he doesn't, this one gets pretty interesting.
UTEP playing at La Tech tonight. We got 2 games tonight at 7 p.m. You can watch it on CBS SN. La Tech 5.5-point favorites. The over/under 48.5. Carter, how's UTEP looking?
Well, Scotty Walden finished last game taking a Gatorade bath, crowd surfing. I think if you do that for the first one, you got to do it for the second win, right? This is just a personal thing. I love Conference USA Wednesday. I don't know how much I like Tuesday.
Tuesday's a little too soon.
Amen.
It's too much.
Amen.
Tuesday's too soon. It's like I haven't even got my mind wrapped around what just happened last week. So that's a personal thing.
Rice playing at UConn this Saturday at 2:30 p.m. You can watch it on CBS SN. UConn 6.5-point favorites, over under 46.5. Ish, handing this one off to you.
I mean, UConn's not very good, and Rice is, I don't know. They've just been like in kind of like a malaise. I feel like they got a great win over UTSA a couple weeks ago.
A tough loss, a good loss versus Tulane.
A decent loss versus, a loss.
Competitive loss.
Sure, whatever.
Sorry, that's talk.
Are y'all saying you're not going to be locked into this game?
I can't say I'm going to be locked in for this game. I do think this is a winnable game. UConn's not very good, And if Rice can pull something out like they did 2 weeks ago, sure. But we'll see.
Oklahoma State playing at Baylor this Saturday at 2:30 p.m. You can watch it on ESPN Plus. Baylor 6.5-point favorites over 64.5. Graven, this one's for you.
Yeah, Sawyer Robinson's been tremendous. It's been the offense at Baylor that's kind of led them to a couple of victories. They've been in most of their Big 12 football games. They've lost a few heartbreakers. Oklahoma State hasn't played that well this year, kind of regressed to the mean without the easiest schedule in the conference. So this is one that the Bears can get. They've been playing hard. We'll see if it continues.
UTSA playing at Tulsa this Saturday at 2:30 p.m. You can watch it on ESPN Plus. UTSA 8-point favorites. The over/under 54.5. Carter, you're going to be locked into this one, aren't you?
I'm going to be locked in. UTSA, you get this win, all of a sudden you've got 2 wins in a row and get some momentum here. Tulsa, not a great team, so it's a must-win for UTSA and the Roadrunners.
Ish, closes out here. Utah playing at Houston this Saturday at 6 p.m. You can watch it on ESPN Plus. Utah, 3-point favorites, over/under 36.5.
Just when
Take
Houston...
the under.
yes,
literally.
literally. I was going to say, just when Houston was starting to get some momentum, they had just a abysmal loss to a bad Kansas team. I was really disappointed in that one. Hopefully Zion Chris is good to go. I didn't see his status anywhere.
I don't know.
Because I know Smith finished that game. So we'll see. It depends a lot on him. He was really a really dynamic revelation for that offense. If they can't get him back, though, maybe they still win because Utah stinks too. So who knows?
And Texas,
he is expected to be available.
Okay, perfect.
Nice.
There you go.
And Texas State, I guess, sort of has a bye. They play next Tuesday, so I don't know if you can really count that as a bye. They play
Stop
Louisiana
Tuesdays.
next
Jesus
Tuesday.
Christ.
I know.
They also
but
need a
they'll have a bye.
bye after last week. That was
Yeah,
embarrassing.
true.
Correct. But that'll do it. That's our week 9 slate, guys.
Boom.